But I think, it's the same as nutrition where it's like recovery has a pyramid. Let's master the basics first, similar to what you're saying. If you're doing 3 sessions a week in the sauna, but you have super, super shitty sleep and you're like one of the most stressed out people ever. And
stressed out.
Yeah, you're in this constant inflammatory response, all of this. You're not going to get the benefit there. And then again, it's almost like, okay, well, now you're just wasting time because you really could get more bang for your buck with doing something a little more simple. And then once you master those basics, we can layer those in. Same with nutrition. Master the basics, then we can lay in supplements, quality of food, nutrient timing, all these things. But let's get to the basics first.
We are live.
Oh my God.
With another episode of the Fueling Fire Show. I got my Garry energy back today.
You just made our dog bark.
Sneeze.
No, that was Zazu barking at you. Stranger danger.
Stranger danger. I'm getting a phone call already. Mute it. What up, All Terrain fam? We are here. Another episode, Fueling Fire Show. Do a little Q&A-ish style of rest and recovery. We've seen a lot of our athletes lately really struggling with the how can less be more.
I think that, and in our free Facebook group as well, how can less be more? And then is it normal to feel guilt attached to that? Like to not always be on the go doing more, and then if you're not making progress, that we should just add some things and kind of testing out that actually maybe that's not the case, and guilt usually comes along with that.
Yeah, like when you mean by adding more, like, well, I did a workout, I didn't quite hit the exact metric on the scale that I want, so maybe I should go and do more. Should I run more type thing? Is that kind of what people are running into?
Right. It's like, okay, well then should I add cardio on top of it, or should I go to a HIIT class now? Or I went to this workout and I'm not super, super sweaty and I'm not exhausted. So was that workout not hard enough?
Yeah.
And then it goes on the recover side too of like, am I not recovering enough? Do I need to add more here? And I think it just kind of ends up everywhere where it's like this big convoluted topic of like, what is rest and recovery? Can it be productive? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I like it. When I was a personal trainer, I would always run into, people at the Globo Gym, as I like to call them, for those of you who don't know what the Globo Gym reference is any big box gym, you call it Globo Gym.
Think dodgeball.
And you get that from dodgeball, that title. But just people who would be in this mindset that they're not exactly where they want to be. They'd get a personal training workout, then they'd go take a HIIT class, and then they'd come back later to run on the treadmill. And then they'd go sit in the sauna because they maybe thought the sauna would burn some more weight. And then they would put in all this effort and never get to where they want to go. And then it's not only, you can't even necessarily take that person and just say, hey, like, here's less is more sometimes, and here's why, right? You have to actually break down somebody's whole belief pattern of how they're going to get results.
Right.
So many people are stuck still in this mindset that like you have to just grind harder. Because, it's popular. I'll let you kind of give an example. But for me, in my realm, like for the men, the Cameron Haynes, the David Goggins, the kind of Jocko, not so much as those two, but they're just very polarizing in the sense that they just go fucking hard.
Right.
And it's like, oh, if I want to be like that, I have to go so unbelievably hard all the time. Is there any like females out there that kind of get people with that same little hook?
I don't know if it's necessarily like a specific person I can think of. I think in the female realm, it's almost like we wear all of these hats. And so we feel like we need to be perfect in all of these different realms. And so there's not enough time in the day. So it's like we have to be the perfect friend who's there for everyone, the perfect spouse who's like ready for anything. being able to do all the house chores, taking care of the kids, but also be an athlete. It's just, I feel like there's almost
when are you
like
gonna start doing all the house chores?
I do all the house
I know,
chores.
I'm kidding.
I was like, are you kidding? I'll get into a debate right now with
Here
you
we
about
go.
it.
New episode started. How I do all the chores.
And I think that's not to say that there's not females out there that are like that. And I think,
well, I totally, if you were, anecdotally, I have totally seen more females get stuck in this I got to do more mindset.
mm-hmm.
It's weird that I think guys it's more polarizing for a guy to be like grind.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel like as many guys get into that. It uses maybe as a motivation to get your ass off the couch. But I feel like I've always seen a lot more females who are dedicated to like the 1,000 crunches, the hour-long cardio, and then Pilates or whatever. Right.
And then a lot of that is met with super restrictive eating at the same time. And so I think it just turns into like having to do more in every single aspect. And then that's where we're going to get to the side of mental recovery as well. Mm-hmm. And how, the
being in that position, it also you're hindering yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot. You are not, the more you do, and if you combine that with the restrictive eating, you aren't actually going to be able to obtain results. Right. Like, so you have to start doing it in a way that's smarter, because you're setting yourself up, your physiology and environment that just isn't actually going to adapt or change. It's going to be in guard mode versus thrive mode.
Right. But I think you brought up a good point earlier too, of saying, we have so many people come in, and they're going through, I still just feel like I have to do more. And we can tell them the science behind it. We can tell them why those things are happening. And it really isn't until like they can make that personal shift themselves that I really feel like some people don't realize how shitty they feel. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I'm thinking specifically of our athlete, Heather. She came in and it was like, she is a freaking baller in every single thing that she does. And it was one of those things where it was like, no, I just need to.
She just killed her first bull elk with a bow.
She did. And she's just like, she's just like all around badass and great human being. And I was actually just texting her last night or this morning, asking, because she's at, maintenance calories, and we're really trying to get her to down regulate. She used to go to Orange Theory and lift and run and just like thought she had to do it all. And now she's in like more of a base lifting program where it's like, you may not be like
she was
super
doing all
sweaty
that and only eating 800 calories.
Yeah.
And she came in and she's like, I'm not losing weight.
Right.
And I had to, I sat down and there's a lot of frustration with that, right? Like, and it's totally understandable. And, we had to sit down and position it in a way for her to have the actualization of like, hey, so we have clear data that you're eating 800 calories a day. You're not losing weight. So where do you think that you need to go?
Right.
Do you think you need to burn more calories and eat less to get results? Like, do you think you could eat 500 calories a day? And do you think that's healthy? Right. And her saying like, no, actually, that really doesn't. Now that you say it like that, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Right. And so then we started getting her to position of eating 1,200 more calories a day up to like 2,100 calories.
She was at like 22, I think.
Yeah. And then not gaining a single pound back versus her who was burning a lot more and calories wise in her workouts, and then also only eating 800 calories a day.
Right. And from the 800 to 2,200, she actually started to see adipose tissue from her stomach dump and leave. And it was like, wait, what? Why? And so, but my point is that sometimes it literally has to happen to you, and you have to step in and actually, we always say, trust the process. And I don't know if that's happened to you as well, but I think that's what happened almost with like meeting you in general. And when we first started dating and how I reshifted my training and prioritized that it was like I had heard it time and time again, but I didn't see it. So it was like, this isn't the evidence that I see with the people that I'm surrounding myself with. It's not what I see. What is Azu doing?
Side note, a dog still doesn't grasp the whole, why are you guys standing at a table talking?
She's 2. It's all right. The other one that's 13 is just passed out.
Guys, I think you should be paying attention to me. We should go on another walk.
Don't say it out loud. But I think it was just this idea. It was this construct, but I didn't see anyone actually doing it. So it was like, no one's really like living into that. So I don't know. So it's like I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and get to work at 6. And I was a first-year teacher in Baltimore City. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And then I would get home, walk the dog, go to a CrossFit class, and then take their barbell class afterwards. And even the barbell coach every time was like, don't come from your Metcon here. Like you have to stop. Hailey, if you want to build true strength, please don't go.
You were eating like Skittles at lunch.
Yeah, I literally was like, I'm running around like crazy. Like, what'd you eat today? I'm like, I had like an English muffin with peanut butter, and then I had Skittles for lunch. And she's like, and then you just did a full CrossFit class, and now you're over here like, hi, can I PR my snatch? And she's like, I want to shake you like a baby. And yeah, and it was one of those where I'm like, no, I just need to go to the gym more. I just need to lift harder. I just need to grind. I'm being weak and I'm being a baby. And what? But it wasn't until like I had to actually stop. What were, no, I know what you're going to say. We're not doing that. Are you going to use brat?
Yeah.
Brat does not even fit in that situation.
I was weak. What did you say? What were your two?
A baby.
Adverbs.
Being weak and I was acting like a baby.
Is it adjectives or adverbs?
What's the difference between an adjective and an adverb? Do you know?
An adverb is like boosting a word that has action in it. Mm-hmm. And an adjective is describing more of a noun.
Okay, that was pretty good.
Okay.
That was pretty good. I'm proud of you.
Nice.
What was the question?
How are you a brat?
I'm not a brat. Oh my god. But I really.
All right, hold up. I always throw these inside jokes out, and then sometimes I think if you don't know who we are, it sounds a little
like you're rude.
Yeah. So we have an RM. So Hailey, when she was young, hated so much when her sister would call her a brat.
Yes.
And then recently,
still to this day, Jessica, I know you're listening. And if you call me a brat, I swear.
But then recently our athletes discovered that brat is her trigger word. Yeah. And so we were all low key like, hey, during this week, let's all just want to individually call her a brat and just be like, why is everyone calling me a brat?
It hasn't actually worked yet though. I'm waiting.
Well, now you know you're onto the.
Yeah, but eventually I'll forget. So
anyways, I'm only adding that in there because I wanted to get a rise because it's her trigger word.
Mm-hmm. But okay, hold on that story too. Speaking of brat and not eating anything, my sister would usually call me a brat because she's 12 years older than me and had to babysit me all the time. And for some reason, when I was like 10 years old, I thought that cereal was the healthiest thing you could possibly ingest. And still to this day, I'm convinced it probably is. But the cereal was like up on the top cabinet. And so I always used to ask her for cereal for lunch. Like that's the only thing I wanted to eat. And she's like, no, I'm not going to get you cereal for lunch. You need to eat real food. But all I heard was like, no, I'm not getting you cereal. And so then I was like, well, I'll get it myself. So I'd climb on the counters and she would tell me, Hailey, you can't climb on the counters. I'm like, you told me you're not going to give me cereal. You told me I can't climb on the counters. And she's like, Hailey, you are being such a brat. And then it just ruined everything for me. But turns out she just wanted me to eat real food. Good job, Jess.
Good job, Jess. Sweet story, babe. All right. So today, for those of you who hate resting and recovery,
or makes you anxious,
maybe we'll be able to tell you how to train smarter, train with more intent, and then get more results from the effort you're putting in.
Before we go to the how, let's go to the why. Why should we be recovering anyways?
Great question. And let's break it down into kind of two segments, right? So the why is why we want to prioritize appropriate rest and recovery. So obviously you want to get the stimulus from the effort that you're putting in, and you only get the actual stimulus when you give the body a chance to rest, digest, and repair, right? Like that's one thing. That's a very like ones and twos thing, right? The second thing is why you want to do that is for your own, how your body reacts on a day-to-day basis. Meaning like if you're consistently fatigued, the central nervous system is consistently fired up, you're consistently running around in this fight or flight mechanism, like how you're going to respond to day-to-day stimuli, the kids yelling, the traffic, the dogs barking is going to be just totally...
Like these minor stressors are going to start to become things that just like tip you over the edge.
And fitness is not going to be something that's now amplifying your life, right? Mm-hmm. It's not something that should make you at your wit's end because you're eating nothing, you're grinding harder, the nervous system's fatigued as all get out, and now you have less capacity for the rest of your life. So like, you know, obviously in a ones and twos, we want to get the best results that we can get from our training. And then secondly, like fitness should amplify your life. It should allow you to approach those things more relaxed. And if you're not overdoing it, you will, right? And we all know when you were overtraining, early mornings at the gyms, all day at school, get to school at like 6 a.m., teach kids till like 5 p.m., so 11-hour day, and then come back to the gym and a little, you know, a commute to the gym and then train another 2 hours. Like you were, I don't know.
Did I enjoy training? Should we tell the back squat story or can that live for another day?
I think it would be. I think it's good. So I'm going to say my story because you'll paint yourself in this angelical light.
I am an angel, and I think our listeners would agree.
So she would overtrain. I would tell her like, hey, stop doing this. But, you know, her goal was I want to be a competitor, do it all, eat nothing, and work a full-time job. And so
I wanted to be shredded and be strong.
Yes. And then she wanted to also be better at gymnastics, but then the strongest athlete in the gym. And I was like, okay.
Coaching your significant other is a little difficult sometimes. Let's be real.
I would not recommend it. But she'd come in, she'd do some cardio in the morning, eat nothing, teach all day, and then come and do back squats. And she'd get underneath of it, crumble, and
like actually drop to my knees over and over again.
Literally, like the bar falls off her back. Why does this weight feel so heavy? Start crying. Why am I not getting stronger? And I'm like, well, do you not see why? Because it's obvious to me. Fair?
That is very accurate. But it didn't, it felt, and I think we said this when we were talking about something.
Guys, this joke I'm about to say in a second is going to be so good.
Something totally different. But I literally feel like I just wasn't awake. Like I could not see it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, no, I'm right. And then it was also like in this self-sabotaging thing of like, no, I'm just weak. And I think that was what's playing in my head, was all the negative self-talk that was happening throughout it also. So it was like, I couldn't even hear what you were actually trying to say to me. Cause I was just like, no, it's me.
Yeah.
It's not that I need to change anything that you want me to do. It's me. I'm the problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's typically how the story goes.
Continue on, sir.
You're just teeing me up for too many good ones today. So we were at Qdoba and I get this burrito. As soon as I open it, it falls apart, just crumbles, deteriorates. And I'm like, wow, this burrito crumbled faster than you underneath a set of back squats.
I laughed, right? I think I laughed. Did I think it was funny then?
No, you did not. You had your little shock. Garry!
I don't think that's what I sound like. I feel like I probably laughed at that point in time. I cried. Either one.
A little bit of both. Definitely a little bit of both. But yeah, I mean that was fitness not amplifying your life, right? Mm-hmm. That was it, making it another stressor, making, then you go home to the dogs and you'd be so tired from a long day. You're frustrated with something the dogs do, whatever it is, right? Like we all
zero
do.
Patience.
Yeah. So it's like, why are you okay? What are you gaining out of this? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's why.
Okay. That's why it's important.
It's an example.
Right.
Of why you want to make sure that it's giving you something, a benefit, not a negative.
Right. And I think and you were talking basically that there's these two kind of avenues that we're looking for. Why is it important? A, to get the most out of your training in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
B, outside of the gym. So it's like outside of the gym, you're going to be not the most amazing person to be around. Inside of the gym, when we don't prioritize, that's when we run into injury and all of those things. So it's like, those are the two realms.
The whole, and it's tough to flirt with because fatigue, nervous system fatigue is what you're trying to elicit for an adaptation, right? And I saw somebody just post something today, real high level power lifter, way up there above me. And real smart guy. And he's just talking about like he's in week 2 of his block and didn't make progress, and talking about, like basically like a type 2 adaptation, where in the sense that like just because the weight didn't go up that day, he knows that that's an actual good sign, right? Like he knows that he's getting a fatigue. He knows by week 3 he'll kind of get back to baseline. Then week 4 he'll allow himself to have a deload, and then he'll come back stronger, right? And so like all training is flirting with this line of dipping into nervous system fatigue to elicit a response, but we can go too low in that rabbit hole. That's what people don't understand, is that you can over fatigue the system, especially when you combine it with low eating, that you're not going to bounce back, that you're not going to get the adaptation that you want, right?
Right.
So that's where it comes into like, why is this less is more type mindset? Because there is scientific evidence that you can dip too far. We need a dip, but you can dip too far,
right?
And then you don't get what you want.
Just like it's like, yeah, if you don't go far enough, like you need to have enough of a stimulus to make the change, but it's finding that sweet spot. And I think part of that, very similar to how we see these super high level athletes, they've really mastered the craft of listening and understanding their body and what their body's telling them. And that's going to come with time and coaching. And
it's hard to flirt the line and understand where you're at because, like, there's plenty of fitness classes out there where you don't challenge the system enough, where you are doing the same weight on the body pump bar for 1 million reps and not getting any change. And that could be because you're not challenging the system enough, or you like hear of muscle confusion or constantly varied, right? Like, yeah, there is a line. There's definitely there's a group of people out there in the fitness industry or fitness world who aren't challenging their system enough to elicit an adaptation. But then there's definitely a big group, especially nowadays with social media, where you can kind of see like, well, Rich Froning or Annie Thorisdottir or whoever is doing so much training all the time, or whatever, Cameron Haynes, well, I just must not be doing enough, right?
Right.
So it definitely makes it a little bit easier to fall into that trap.
Yeah. So I think we've harped on why it's important, but I think the how is also another one of these convoluted things. Similar to what I was saying earlier, is like sometimes we can go too far down the rabbit hole of rest and recovery also, and not really understand what exactly it should look like. What should we be prioritizing? Is it every day? Is it once a week? Like, what exactly does that system look like?
Yeah.
And is there a best practice?
For sure. So we, at least in all terrain, we don't think of it as like, oh, I took days off, so that's all I need. Right.
So it's not like we just need to rest as in I didn't do a workout today.
Yeah.
That's not what we're looking for.
No.
That's not bad. That's not what we're looking for.
Good start.
Yeah.
But we have to, there's definitely some high level things to think of when it comes into recovery. And then there's definitely some things that are more low hanging fruits that I think people should master first. Like, for example, doing the sauna 20 minutes 3 times a week. It's a very high level form of recovery, right? Like, if you're somebody who's doing that, like, if you're doing everything else, it's not going to work. It'll elicit a great response if we aren't mastering the basics. And if you're even to that point, probably somebody who's pretty far down the rabbit hole and you're looking for just like you're cutting hairs. What's the term? Slicing hairs.
I don't know. You have a hair on your glasses, though.
It's your hair.
But I think, it's the same as nutrition, where it's like recovery has a pyramid. Let's master the basics first, similar to what you're saying. If you're doing 3 sessions a week in the sauna, but you have super, super shitty sleep and you're like one of the most stressed out people ever. And
stressed out.
Yeah, you're in this constant inflammatory response, all of this. You're not going to get the benefit there. And then again, it's almost like, okay, well, now you're just wasting time because you really could get more bang for your buck with doing something a little more simple. And then once you master those basics, yeah, we can layer those in. Same with nutrition. Master the basics, then we can lay in supplements, quality of food, nutrient timing, all these things. But let's get to the basics first. So what are the basics of recovery?
Yeah, let's break it down. So, first, I always like to say, and it's kind of a blanket term, but I always like to prior to checking inflammation in the sense of, are we carrying around extra adipose tissue? Cool. We now know for sure that higher levels of adipose tissue are going to produce more inflammatory cells, right? Fat tissue, higher levels.
I'm going to say, can you define adipose tissue just like for the layman? It's not really used in like daily vernacular sometimes.
Adipose tissue, everyone is just, obviously it is your fat tissue. But it's now classified as an endocrine organ, right? So it plays, it works on your hormone axis. It's going to, it's just like, it's like your skin, right? Your skin, you process vitamin D through your skin and that produces hormones, right? Your fat tissue, right? It plays into that same system, right? Like you think of, what's underneath your skin, right? Adipose tissue, right? So all that, everything affects everything, all that to say, right? But we do know more adipose tissue, fat tissue is going to produce more inflammatory markers always, right? But sometimes that person is struggling to lose the weight, right? So we can still make a very quick is that the correct word? Marked?
I don't know what you're going to say next.
Improvement? Marked improvement? Is that right? Words.
Like a very quick, like one that you can actually see and feel.
We don't have to be at our ideal composition to start getting really good benefits from eating the appropriate needs for our metabolism. So first and foremost, it's like, hey, if we really want to recover, if we're overfueling the system all the time, you're going to be continually digesting things on a a blood level, right? Thinking of like blood sugar, higher lipids, right? They're going to be consistently elevated on a much higher level because that's your body trying to dispose of the excess, right? Like your blood sugar spikes. It doesn't have, especially if it's sitting, or let's say we haven't like depleted glycogen, right? It just has nowhere to go. And then somebody who's been sedentary all day long, they're consistently overfueling. They're consistently glycogen's full. So as soon as you keep getting sugar, right, it doesn't have anywhere to go. So it just goes to the bloodstream again. So now we have high blood sugar, right? And that's going to cause inflammation, right? And then especially if we do that continually, right, we're going to start creating more heart inflammation. Like if we're always at like 140 with our blood sugar all the time, it's just like continually scratching at your arterial walls over and over, right? So we can start, we could go and get try to get our best sleep. We could go and do the sauna. We could go and do cold. We could go and take a rest day. But if we're continually overfueling the system, we're just never going to get into as deep of rest. We're going to continually be shooting ourselves in the foot, living in this chronically inflamed state. Inversely, though, if we're consistently under eating, and even if you do take a day off, it doesn't matter because now you're missing building blocks, right? So where somebody has 2 excess building blocks, now you don't have enough to
can't rebuild.
Basics. Yeah.
It's like, I'm trying to survive.
Right. Cortisol's starting to rise. You're under more stress hormone. Testosterone and estrogen are starting to go down. So then now you're also starting to lose lean body mass because you just don't have enough energy to support that lean body mass, right? If you're consistently under eating, the body's going to be like, yo, this lean body mass takes the most amount of energy to keep alive. So I'm going to get rid of some, right? And also we seem to not be eating anything. So now I'm going to carry around this FUPA, right? I mean, how many people have we had who are under eaters they're carrying this midsection, we actually get them to eat more and get adequate protein, and that just disappears, right? They're not having this like stress adipose tissue carrying response in a specific area.
Right.
So first foremost, things that we have to master, we gotta start fueling for our metabolic needs. And we can start seeing really good improvement with recovery and energy, regardless if we still have more adipose tissue, right? How many people we start to get to start eating less, they're not overeating their metabolic needs. They're like, holy shit, I have so much energy. And I'm like, imagine that your system's not bogged down and feeling lethargic because you're consistently overfueling, you're consistently digesting, you have too high blood sugar, you feel like shit, and you're like, why does my head feel like a cloud all day long?
Well, and in both of those realms where it's like, and I think all of us can say that with health and wellness, regardless if it's something that we want to lose physically, we just want to feel more vibrant and have this energy that we've lacked. And it's whether we're over fueling or under fueling, our body is utilizing the energy that it has to go to those things. So it's whether it's like I'm in survival mode and just trying to make sure that we can stay upright and like our heart's going to keep beating. I don't have energy to like make you want to go run and play with the kids.
Or put on more lean body mass.
Yeah. And then the other way also, it's like, look, we are trying really hard to like get all of these alert systems in our body under control. So yeah, you're going to feel super foggy and feel like shit. Like we don't have enough energy to help you in those other things. That's why finding that sweet spot, that's why you see more energy because it's allocated correctly within your body now.
Yep.
To balance.
Yep. Body is really good at knowing what to do with the appropriate amount of fuel, right? Filling up to that full line each and every time, not consistently overfueling and not running on E all the time.
And again, it's for your needs because it's not going to be the same for you and Susie down the street.
For sure.
It could be.
So there's the basics. Nutrition, definitely eating for your metabolism, right? Regardless of if it's organic or not. I don't care if you're eating all organic or you're doing keto. You first need to master the appropriate amount of fuel, and then we can start layering in some other things in nutrition. But also within that, then we're going to start getting better sleep, right? If we're not consistently overfueling, we're going to get more REM because typically when you're just overcaloried, it usually means that you probably are digesting a lot going into sleep. So then now your temperature's too high. Your body's prioritizing digesting, so now you're asleep, but you're not getting REM and slow wave sleep. So typically we see people who are overfueling, they're missing like the first one or two REM cycles in a night, right?
And I think that piece specifically harps on a big myth that's going around or has been going around in the fitness community for a while is, I should stop eating before X amount of time. Like, that's the only way that I can find progress.
They only say it's like, oh, it's for digestion. I'm like, okay, cool.
Or they say it's like, it's for fat loss.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not actually, I heard on the radio today, it's not calories in versus calories out. It's when you eat them. And I was like,
bullshit.
I'm frustrated. But I think this is what we're talking about, or when you hear a coach or someone kind of give that advice more specifically of, have you stopped eating closer up to your bedtime? And this is what we're talking about is prioritizing your recovery and quality sleep, not necessarily like your caloric needs. It's sometimes those get a little bit confusing and convoluted. And I just wanted to make sure we are being clear about why we do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's typically they go hand in hand, right? Like if you are not overfueling, you are just bogged down with less digestion. So even if you do eat closer to bed, you're still not going to be sitting there, sleeping. We all know, right? Think of like Thanksgiving and you try to go to bed after Thanksgiving or some huge meal and you're like, oh my God.
Right. You go get barbecue with friends.
My gut's busting.
Yeah.
And I'm uncomfortable laying
hot
here.
As shit.
Right. You can't get into that deep rest and digest. Right. So, then once we can master those needs, maybe cut off eating a little bit sooner, then we start getting a little bit more REM, a little bit more slow wave sleep. And then we have more energy, right? And also, having higher levels of adipose tissue tends to lead to more sleep apnea, right? So, sleep, metabolic needs tend to go hand in hand. And then lastly, obviously hydration, right? And I don't think we need to harp too much. I think a lot of people, play this one out. And I'll use my little go-tos. You know, we're born 75% water, we die 65% water. So aging is a battle of drying out. You know, your 1% dehydration equals 6% cardiac output loss. So you're just making it that much harder on your heart to circulate blood. And most heart attacks happen in the morning when we're at our most dehydrated. So hydrate, fucking hydrate. You can only go 3 days without it. It's probably pretty important to your body. It's what you're made of primarily. And people don't give it enough prioritization.
Right.
Hailey.
Do you see that really big water bottle? I'm doing a lot better.
I know. You know what I also see? A
lot better. What?
I usually see by the end of the day, it's still pretty much full.
That was only yesterday, but you know what? That's fine. But basically, super, super basics, no matter who you are, is prioritizing the things, as you always say, that's, you know, the things that allow us to survive.
Yep.
Eating, sleeping, drinking, water.
And we need to do those if we want to have enough building blocks to get the adaptation from our training, or we need to not be getting too much so our body can have more time to organize it properly.
So let's say someone has those 3 things under control and they're like your everyday athlete, have a full-time job, family, like, you know, they're not trying to compete in anything. They're just trying to stay fit and healthy. What would kind of be some other basics for them? Like they're like, yeah, okay, I'm doing those 3 things. But I'm still, you know, thinking I need to do more training. What would some of the basics recovery look like for your average day athlete? Yeah,
I think from there, 2 things that I really see that work well for us is paying a little bit more attention to the breakdown of your macronutrients.
Okay.
Definitely making sure you're getting enough adequate protein. You know, we always see people who are just consistently, even maybe they're not overeating, but they're only hitting, you know, carbs and fats and really signaling the IGF-1 pathway all the time with their food. A lot of insulin.
How much protein should people be ingesting? Average.
Yeah.
Again, so this is ballparked and not.
RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram. Where we typically lie is about 1.4 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. And if you went and did like a traditional macros program, they're going to tell you like 1 gram per pound of body weight. So ours, to break that down a little bit, the RDA is about 40% of your body weight in protein. Ours is about 60 to 70% of your body weight in protein. If you went and did typical macros, you're going to see 100% of your body weight in protein. You know, the RDA is a little low for us if we want to kind of, especially if we're combining it with good training. You know, I think if there was somebody who's not training as much, right?
Or it's like a great starting point. And then, because again, it's all about what you can hit sustainably. So it's like, let's get there first. If that's where you're at, then we can talk about.
And if you want to talk about performance, right? There's enough data out there to definitely say like, performance wise, you'll feel a fuck ton better and perform a lot better if you have a little higher level protein.
Right.
The RDA. And so paying attention a little bit more to your macro breakdown, right? Like not getting super stuck in like, I got to hit the exact carbs, fats, and proteins, but a range of proteins. And then also, you know, not being like only carbs and no fats. Like if you're not getting the fats, like you're going to be consistently hungry. You're going to feel like you're going to eat and you're going to immediately feel hungry like 20 minutes later. We see that a lot when people are not eating enough fats. And then they don't have enough energy to train because they're sitting there feeling hungry. We all know when we're hangry, things don't feel good. And then inversely too.
Never felt hangry before.
You know, if you're eating really high fats, but yet your training is a really high intensity training, where you're using primarily carbohydrates, you're just going to get a lot more brain fog because you're not giving your body the number one macronutrient. You're not giving your brain the number one macronutrient that it eats and gets energy from, which is carbohydrates, right? Especially, I mean, you can transition the brain and everything to being more fat adapted if you do it for a prolonged period of time. But like also, even if you are a fat adapted person, but then you go and do all this high intensity interval training, like you're probably still going to not feel as good as you should because you're still trying to tap into this carbohydrate system that is very depleted. So, you know, again, not saying like you need to be super exact, but we just don't want to be super skewed in one way.
Well, and I think sometimes it's also just gives you the opportunity to look at that data if you have the chance to also, where it's like, oh, okay, like, you know, I may be missing out on some of this recovery that you're talking about. Let me look at that and just see if, like, are my fats super high or super low? Are my carbs super high or super low? And again, just using that data to help guide you in that decision, not saying it needs to be like this exact number all of the time. It's just like ballpark wise, like, oh, am I only getting 20 grams of fat per day? Like,
yeah,
I might not feel great. Let me try to increase that and see if I feel a difference.
And each macronutrient provides different building blocks of energy, right? Like fats are going to be what we turn into our hormones, right? So like if you are getting really low fats, right? Like you're not getting enough fats for it to turn into sterols, to turn it into, you know, our anabolic hormones, right? Or same thing with carbohydrates, right? Where, you know, if we do a lot of things that require immediate energy, glycogen, and our brain eats a lot of glucose to concentrate, right? Like if we're under fueling that, like why? Yeah, of course you're going to be sitting there like feeling like you can't concentrate on things, that you don't want to do the things, or maybe it gives itself this perceived low motivation, right? Like so many people want to tie things into like, I just don't feel like this right now. Well, you know, your brain, your conscious brain is very much affected by what is going on physiologically, right? Like our emotions, we like to think that we're so in control of all our emotions, but it's like, yo, the brain is just like anything else. And if you're not giving it enough energy, it's irritated. And then that is perceived as hangry, right?
They can't all be controlled by, you know, like conscious actions and thinking. It's like we also have to feed the brain because the brain is in control of that, where it's like it's not a willpower type thing. It's more.
And then the last thing, you know, protein, like when we challenge the system to lay down more lean body mass, you know, we need protein. Proteins are essentially the same molecules as like your DNA. And when we do that and we lay down more lean body mass and we increase our, you know, muscle mass, right? We're starting to increase our mitochondrial density, right? So our mitochondrial density, meaning mitochondria is what produces ATP. ATP is energy, right? So if we're not giving the body like the building blocks to lay down new lean body mass, right, we're not going to be getting what we want from the adaptation of our training, right? Like it's very much a catch-22 that you need energy to train, but we also know if you don't have energy, you don't want to train. The problem is that training gives you more energy. Why is it doing that? Because you're increasing your mitochondrial density when you put on more lean body mass. And when you do that, you end up having more ATP, which is more energy. So we need all three building blocks to really set the system up to be in a position to recover well. And then the second one, what was the...
For your everyday athlete, like what should they be doing to recover? They have the basics. They're eating adequate protein. What
was the other one I was going to say? Can you remember osmosisly?
Osmosisly? No, I didn't absorb your brain. But I'm going to ask a question that we get all the time is, should I just do mobility every day? Like, is this what I should do to recover? And that could be something totally off and not remind you of that. But I think...
Let's save that one because we're going to get into a little bit more higher level.
Right.
Things.
I think that's just a question we get asked all the time is like, should I just stretch? And should I just mobilize? Like, I think people assume that that's a very low level solution. And so that's kind of what people also hop and gravitate towards. Is like sauna and stretching. Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, with any stretching, you're still going to be tearing down more tissue. You're still going to be expending more energy. When a lot of times like tissue just needs a certain amount of time to cool down. Right. Like, you know, I think if you're somebody who only works out an hour a day, and as long as you're training that in a way that elicits structural balance, you know, meaning full range of motions, you're strengthening anteriorly and posteriorly balanced, right? You don't need to do a whole lot of stretching. But if you're a single modality athlete who's pounding the pavement hard, or you're hitting the spin bike hard, right? You are somebody who's producing a lot of neural tension because your body's bracing for that pathway, that movement, that it starts to get so hardwired for that movement that you start to see like other areas become weaker or imbalanced. And so what you can do definitely in that position is like, hey, can I go and foam roll get this mechanoreceptor and neural tension to calm down, where it's like really hypertonic and bracing for this continual one stride over and over. Can I get this to cool down so then maybe I can go get a little bit more bang for my buck with my glute activation stuff, right? Like maybe I'm a cyclist, my quads are super dominant because I train them so hard. Can I go maybe foam roll them a little bit more beforehand, then strengthen my glutes? But does it improve recovery? Recovery is very subjective. It's definitely like there's not a very concrete
metric
data that you're gonna like improve something in the muscle. Is very much a perception of recovery, right? Decreased pain, right? Like maybe you rolled out that muscle that was really sore and now it has a little less pain. Now, is it a positive if it gets you to get back to training faster? Yeah, I do. I think so. Like a lot of people were in this boat. Kelly Starr came in, wanted to bring mobility one side, so naturally he created some enemies that were like, no, you don't need to mobilize. And the people who are saying like you don't ever need to do that, they're just guys typically who only do like 5x5 of a lift. And it's like, yeah, you probably don't, but you're also probably somebody who's never ran further than 2 miles. And if you do run more than 2 miles, you fucking piss and moan about it and talk about it hurts. Right. So like maybe you do need to go and do some more mobility stuff to get into this position. Right. Or constructive movement plans to get into a position where you can run a little bit more pain-free. So as far as recovery, I don't think you need to go and mobilize and do this all the time, unless you're really feeling beat up and you feel like the central nervous system is recognizing a lot of pain from your workouts. Then I would say go and down regulate, like let the system, if we are in a perceived pain, like the nervous system is going to be more agitated again. We're not going to recover as good.
So it's not something that we need to do after every single workout, no matter what. It's not something that needs to be this like 30-minute aspect of our workout.
What you're going to gain from putting a whole lot of time in is going to be marginal.
Right. So minimum dose of effectiveness. How often would you say?
I would say once, twice a week. Just do it in a way that allows you to really downregulate, right? Like, that Zen feeling you get after yoga, like once or twice a week, go give yourself that feeling. Go get that like, oh, okay, I'm like not agitated. My central nervous system is calming down after a week long of lifting.
Right.
It's like if something's in pain, right? We all know when we're in pain, our brain's on it. You're probably a little bit more agitated and short with people, right? And same thing can be from training, right? If we're in a lot of soreness and pain from our training, it's still going to aggravate. The central nervous system doesn't differentiate what the pain
and
is
again,
from.
if this is turning into something that it's like, you feel like you need to add it in all the time and it's just becoming this one extra thing you need to do, again, you're not getting the stimulus that you want to get from it. It's not creating that down regulation. And we actually do have a free upper and free lower body mobility guide, just if you're kind of curious to see how we I guess like program that out
or
how
to get the minimum dose of effectiveness.
Yeah, how basic it really is. Just let us know if you want to grab a copy of either one of those upper and lower. Because you can actually see it takes like 10 minutes.
I remembered what my second thing was.
Okay, perfect. So they should have adequate protein if you're a basic athlete. And what else should they be doing?
Not too high on carbs or not too skewed to one side, carbs or fats. You're eating for your metabolic needs, not over or under consistently. You've gotten better sleep. Then I would start getting into what foods are you a little bit more reactive to?
Okay, so food sensitivities.
Yeah.
This is another big
things,
ding, ding.
If you are somebody who has really, IBS with dairy, right? Like you are not going to probably have as good recovery. Like you could probably put on an Oura ring and watch your body start to metabolize this dairy and see your heart rate variance start to tank, right?
And is that because dairy is inherently bad?
No.
I think this is where people are like, I'm cutting things out because it's a bad food. And it's like, we all have our own responses to that. So we're saying, find those things that your body is specifically having a sensitive reaction to. Not just blanketing what the universe is telling you.
And it's pretty much anything that makes you gassy, right? gassy, shitting yourself, irregular. Right? Like those are all things that...
Constant stomach pain.
Yeah. I mean, that's your body. Again, you are creating now, your body feels like it's under attack. It's creating this inflammatory response. It kicks up your inflammatory cells, right? The same things that would go and kind of attack COVID are starting to attack the food that you're digesting, right? So you're getting all these lymphocytes and, kicking up this immune response that's an inflammatory, right? Every time you go to repair something, it starts with inflammation. Like those things are coming in, trying to clear it out, and you create this inflammatory response, right? And so when you do that, though, we definitely see people have lower recovery scores, like on their wearables, right? You see, my case in point, me, like I love whiskey, but, we recently took food sensitivity tests, and a lot of people say they're controversial, but frankly, everything in there I've recognized in one shape or form of another that I've had some type of reaction to it, and it's given me more of a way to actually pinpoint and describe what it is, right? So when I was young, high school, bread, post lunch, I would be sitting in the computer lab just like curled over in my chair in pain. I got older, I thought, oh, gluten, right? Like we all just think like everything that's bad in gluten is or everything that's bad in bread is gluten. But the food sensitivity test says I'm fine with gluten, and it's actually wheat and rye and barley that I have a reaction to. I'm like, oh, that makes sense with whiskey, which you're not getting, big doses of gluten because you're just, it's vapor and all that, right? The protein's not getting transported in the vapor. But I drink whiskey and my HRV, my heart rate variance on my Whoop, which tells you if you're recovered or not, tanks. But if I drink vodka, like Tito's that's made from potatoes, fine, right? I could be more hungover, drink more alcohol volume from vodka and not have as bad HRV as like one drink of whiskey. So even before we took the food sensitivity test, I would tell you, I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like I have one glass of whiskey and my recovery is shit the next day.
Right.
It's like, well, whiskey's made out of rye, wheat, and barley, right? Or we would eat this chickpea pasta and it's really high in protein. And I thought it would always tear me up the next day. And I always like, well, it's just the high levels of protein. It's probably
all at once.
Yeah, all at once. I'm eating this big bolus of meat with it. And then also eating the chickpea pasta. But chickpeas came back as my second most reactive food. And it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So after you do that, then start paying attention to the foods you're reactive to. If you are reactive to it, you're probably getting an inflammatory response. You're probably going to see, which means signals to the body that it's under stress. And when we're under stress, our heart rate variance gets lower. And that's part of recovery, right? If the system recognizes it's under stress, especially if you go to bed, you overate and you were overeating with like dairy and cheese, like why do you think you feel like shit and hungover after you drink some booze and eat pizza the next day? Or even if you don't drink, right? Like so many people talk about like, oh my gosh, I eat this certain food nowadays, cheese and bread together. I wake up the next day and I feel like I'm fucking hungover.
Right.
So I think that would be the next thing into recovery after you've mastered those other things.
So do you think those are most of the low level?
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, low hanging fruits, we can do this. I'm going to try to do those as consistently as possible. Obviously, we're all human beings. It's not going to be perfect. What are these more high level solutions? You already alluded to the sauna a little bit. And you've talked about like bodybuilders, powerlifters, all these things. They're doing a couple of these other tips and tricks, but what are those high level, like, okay, we really want to unlock recovery? Yeah.
And I think, first and foremost, again, these things don't work if you don't have those basics mastered.
Yeah. Like don't only listen to this part of the podcast.
Yeah. You don't see an Olympian who maybe you see doing all these crazy recovery protocols, not doing these lower level things.
There's some posts about them because they do them every day.
Yeah.
They're really fucking boring.
Yeah.
For them to post about it.
Yeah. Oh, hey guys, guess what I did again today? I ate for my metabolic needs. I mean, Michael Phelps, right, has the calorie bit that he needs to a T, right? And the dude
wasn't like something absurd, like 7,000 calories when he was training for the Olympics.
Something absolutely nuts, like 7,000 calories a day. And the dude's absolutely shredded, right? And like that shows you like the importance of eating for those metabolic needs, right? Mm-hmm. Like he wasn't going to be the top athlete swimming that much and under eating by 4,000 calories.
Right. And again, it's like also what may be, again, for your metabolic needs, he could be eating 2,700 calories, which for a male is a good amount of food. And it's like, yeah, we can maintain there too. But it's like, so he could be eating that. That seems like an adequate amount of food. He would be surviving. He would look shredded still. It would be great, but he would not be
the Olympian that
he was. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, higher level solutions, and we'll kind of, not hit these too hard and long because I think the basics are the more important ones. But and I love heat exposure. When you're talking, and I don't think it always has to be sauna, just any type of getting in some hot tub, sauna, steam room where you get to the point of feeling uncomfortable. You're going to hit those heat shock proteins, which is all the rage buzzwords now. It definitely seems to show that it increases your growth hormone, which is going to help with, tissue recovery. And then it also increases your red blood cell count. So especially like if you're an endurance athlete and you want a little bit more performance, exposing yourself to heat is good. What I think is better is exposing yourself to cold. Mm-hmm. I think,
which I was super against for a long time.
I think you get cold. I definitely think you get more of a mental aspect. I think the heat actually gives you more of a physiological response, but I think the cold gives you a lot more of controlling stress response.
Yes.
Meaning, if I can get into cold, which immediately triggers this fight or flight response, and which is dumping adrenaline to tell you to get the fuck out of there. If I can then in turn start consciously controlling my breathing through that, not panic breathing,
right,
not freaking out. If I can learn to control my my body's responses under high duress, high adrenaline, that's going to have a better crossover to everything else in life, right? Like when you get into something like in traffic, right? And it's stressing you out, right? You're not going to be so quick to freak the fuck out because
it's not your default as much anymore.
Yeah. I think when you started off at the beginning of your day, I think it's a beautiful thing to first thing in the morning when you're tired, lethargic, you probably don't want to do the shit anyways that comes with the day, and you're
warm and cozy already.
You're warm and cozy, you're hop in the shower, and if you turn it to cold, just something about starting your day off with something that you don't want to do and consciously electing to do it. There's nothing, even meditation, I don't think sets my body up better for then going and doing everything else I need to do the rest of the day with a much better outlook on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can personally say, you've been trying to get me to take a cold shower for a long time. And I would dabble in ice baths and things after like a really intense workout or like Spartan races, stuff like that. It was kind of like, oh, I'll do an ice bath. Literally thinking of it more so as like, I'm so sore. So it's like icing my whole body at once. And it really wasn't until I started doing them consistently. It wasn't just this one-off type thing. And that's when I really noticed those mental benefits. And I've talked about it on the podcast a couple times. I'm naturally just a very anxious person. I've overcome a lot of anxiety, but I have a panic response to like very normal everyday things.
Yeah.
And exposing myself to cold every day has really been, honestly, I would almost say like one of the, I don't know if it's the only thing. Maybe I was doing all of these other things kind of at once together. But like you were saying, it was one thing that you overcame every time. And when I initially started, I would literally get in and I would be just like this, going in a little like spinning in circles because I
and not breathe.
Could not stand still. And Garry would laugh at me because I would spin in circles and say, "I'm cold and it's okay. I'm cold and it's okay." Whereas like I guess I was forcing me to breathe because I was talking. But then it got to the point, and I would be able to look at my heart rate at that time too, and you literally see it skyrocket. And that was one of the things that was happening in training, whether it was like an endurance-based thing, I would go out and my heart rate would immediately rise to like 170. And we hadn't been doing anything for very long. And so it was when I started to get into the cold and be able to like anticipate, because it's not like the cold ever gets less cold. Like it always feels shocking when you get in. That's the whole point. A point
where you're turning the dial to cold and you're like, I'm so excited.
Right. It's like you brace for it, but instead of having your anxiety brace for it, your heart rate go up, all of this, you start to breathe to brace for it. And so that's what's going to come out in all of the other things. You know, you may find yourself anxious about receiving an email from work like, hey, we need to talk about XYZ. Instead of your panic response immediately being like,
clam up,
it's like, let me take a deep breath. Let me get my heart rate down so that I can have a conversation and I can be level-headed
when you train your nervous system association, right? Yes. You're starting to train neurological, or should I say flight or flight response and the body's default going to breathing, right? Like when you continually do that, you're just getting more to a automatic association response that you don't have to think about of you know, going first default to breathing instead of clamming up.
Right.
So heat, cold for sure. Then I think everything else recovery is very interdependent to the activity. I think, you know, if you're doing high volume CrossFit or Orange Theory and you get really sore quads or something like that, I think something like a simple, Theragun percussion apparatus or a little light foam rolling at the end is going to really cut down on DOMs. It definitely seems to be like what the science says. It's best to cut on DOMs. And again, if you cut down on DOMs and that gets you back to training more, cool, you're going to probably get more adaptation and more capability to respond to things. I think that's a little bit more for high volume things. I don't think that's going to be quite as good for, you know, some power lifter.
Right. And that's delayed onset muscle soreness he's talking about.
Yeah. And then I think, for runners, I think, you know, a compression sock, compression pants is going to be something that's very specific to your recovery. I don't think you're going to get as good a response from, again, a lifter or a CrossFitter. Maybe, you know, compression pants for somebody who's just done like a copious amount of wall balls or squats or something like that.
Right. Or maybe like post-competition, not your every Tuesday.
Yeah. And then, you know, other than that, I think that's it. Everything else is just going to recover on a physiological level and managing stress.
And this is where, again, I think
stress management, meditation, I think that's going to be a big recovery tool. If you're constantly stressed all the time, you don't give yourself a little bit of space each day to downregulate, you're definitely going to be not producing as much testosterone and estrogen.
You don't have a chance to dump the cortisol that's coursing through your body. Like the cortisol is great. That's your stress hormone. It needs to be there, but we need to find a way for it to dump. It can't constantly be in this state of spiked and high, because just as you were saying, that's when we get the negative impact of estrogen, testosterone. All of those are dumping. So it can't be continual. I think we have the basics. And I think one of the biggest things that we're trying to get across to everyone is that it's the basics of recovery that we're usually skipping and we're missing out on. Let's focus on all of those things. I would say, at least in my opinion, eating for your metabolic needs. Like, I don't know how much we can stress that. And that you're not going to override it by the foam roller. You're not going to override it by the chiropractor. You're not going to override all of these things if you're not looking at those basics of survival and you're not looking at stress. But there are a couple things that are going to give you immediate benefit, and there's a couple things that have a little more long-term impacts. And this is kind of one of the things we were talking about, the cold shower. Like, a cold shower can immediately give you that recovery feeling. You're a little more ready, but it's also going to have those long-term effects. There's a couple other things that are going to be like, okay, I need something for like rest and recovery right now. What's going to give me my like immediate bang for my buck?
Good question. What's going to get you the most immediate?
I think I know what
response,
you would.
Like feeling or perception of?
Yeah. And that's the thing where it's like immediate, kind of like we were saying with foam rolling. Like, if it gets you to be more out of pain and feel better, great. not talking long term, like what's something that's going to help you rest and recover more so, and like I could feel that a couple minutes later.
Yeah, I think when we really feel at our worst is when our brain is stuck in a very negative space. And I think these little recovery tactics, like a hot, cold, or a meditation, is going to get you. If you're in a negative headspace, you're feeling shitty about yourself, you're feeling stressed out about everything, I think these things can be a very quick thing to shock the physiology to break yourself out of that negative loop, right? Like, there's so many times where you've noticed me being stressed out. I'm like, I'm just going to go and meditate. Come back and I'm like, hey, everything's sunshine and rainbows again. I love you. Like, you're the best. I'm sorry I was an irritated asshole.
But I think, because, some people are like, I can't meditate. And I'm saying that because I've said it before. And I think one of the things that we get a lot of people to at least try, again, like minimum barrier of effort here, is box breathing. And I think that's something that also, like, literally give yourself 5 minutes. If it's just something you need to, like, zen in the moment, like, get your shit together. Box breathing, I would say, is going to be one of those things. I'm going to do some after this because, I'm all, we've recorded a couple episodes today. Right. I had a bunch of caffeine. I'm talking a lot. I'm really high engaged. My brain is in this very high dopamine state. And I know it's going to lead to an eventual position of being just fried, but I can extend that friedness or push it off more if I go and do some box breathing. Like, it'll allow me to just get a little bit of break, and I'll have some more capacity to go and run and do some more tasks later. But like, if I just went straight from here to the next task, I'd feel burnt. I'd feel fried. I wouldn't be able to concentrate. And that's when, or why we say there's productivity and rest, because it's like, if you take the 5 minutes now to box breathe, if we look at the whole snapshot of your day, you're able to get more done. And, we all like to be productive people.
Yeah. Can you slow down and speed up? Can you take 10 minutes out of your day to actually concentrate another 2 hours?
Because otherwise you're going to hit the wall soon, and you're going to hit the wall hard. So it's like, let's stop before we get to the wall, do something about it, so then we can prolong that. And that's why we say there's the productivity and rest, so that right now you may not feel that initial, like, no, I can keep going. I can keep going. And it's like, well, great. Start listening to yourself. When is that period right before that we need to do something about it, so that in the end, or it's like, before I snap at my spouse, before I yell at my kids, that we can kind of catch ourselves a little bit first, and it really doesn't have to be a big thing that we do. Yeah.
Hey there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the episode and took away some value that will amplify your life. But if you are ready to become an all-terrain human yourself, then click the link below to head over to our Facebook group to receive a copy of our all-terrain body blueprint, the 5 key pillars to a fast metabolism for life. These 5 pillars will show you how to speed up your metabolism at any age and eat for your specific metabolic needs, so you can obtain your ideal composition without eliminating foods and spending all day in the gym. So if you're ready to reclaim your energy, vitality, and fire for life, then click the link below and head over to the All Terrain Fitness Mentality and Fat Loss Facebook group to pick up a copy of the All Terrain Body Blueprint, the 5 key pillars to a fast metabolism for life, and we will see you on the inside.
Anything else that was more short-term, immediate?
No, I think
that's what we usually use. I mean, again, it's
mainly
pretty simple.
How are you reacting to the stimuli around you? How are you reacting to reality? How are you reacting to stimulus in your perception? And when the physiology is not recovered, it's the central nervous system is taxed to its max. It's feeling consistently fatigued. It's feeling overloaded. Your response to how things are going to be shitty. And I think when you can take some time to prioritize rest and rejuvenation on a sense of letting your mind get a break from whatever the stressor is, or you're allowing your system to not be overtrained and dip too far into that fatigue response from training, then I think it all amplifies your life. It allows you to be a better human to people around you. And we all know You don't like working for that boss who's stressed out to the max all the time, super irritable, right?
Snaps you.
Or if you are that boss, like you don't want to be that boss. Like take 10 minutes to just shock the system, get out of that negative headspace so you can react to your, employees with a better, more encouraging. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the immediate, and long term, I think we'll keep long term brief, but it's like, hey, fucking people. I was going to call you all fuckers, but I think many of you who are probably listening. I think who's listening is probably not who I'm talking to or in my head calling you fuckers. But, if you're consistent, I've seen it time and time again. People who are wanting to train more, they're not eating for their metabolic needs. They're type A people who are super go-getters. They're not prioritizing rest and rejuvenation. They're the ones who are then going to the doctor and their blood pressure is through the fucking roof. Mm-hmm. Their blood sugar is through the fucking roof. Their cholesterol is through the fucking roof. And stress can have these long-term physiological responses. You're just starting to day and night wire your brain to think it's consistently under attack, right? Like we know people who run businesses who are, they wake up in the morning and the sheets, like their hands are scrunched tight and they're grinding their teeth and they didn't sleep at all. And then they go and grab the caffeine to dump more adrenaline, and you start to get into this, blood pressure is a natural response. Like people hear blood pressure and they think bad, right? Uh-huh. But blood pressure is something that automatically goes up in a fight or flight response. Like it is something that is immediately getting your body ready to circulate blood more so you can go and fight harder with this thing, right? But the problem is that you can start to because of your internal your mental state and what you're doing with your training, right? You can start to have the body think it's in this fight or flight response all the time, and then you see blood pressure up all the time, right?
It's stuck.
And there's no quicker way to lower your blood pressure than breathing, all right? It's free. Air, O2 is free. It's gonna help you out. Let the body downregulate sometimes. Lower the heart rate, and you're going to start, just like chronic stress has a compounding effect in a negative way, taking time out of your day to lower the stress continually over time is going to have a compounding effect to a positive response to how you respond to stress, a more natural response to stress where it's supposed to be here or there, and it's okay, not versus the brain thinking it's all the time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think kind of the last thing I wanted to say about...
And I love all of you fuckers out there.
I guess the last thing I want to say about rest and recovery is one of the things that I feel like I get asked specifically a lot where they're saying, the biggest struggle is that mental aspect of really feeling like they're not doing enough. And I think it really comes down to, let's all just stop playing the comparison game. Like we need to stop being the most stressed out as the badge of honor, having the most tasks to do as the badge of honor, our lack of sleep as the badge of honor. Like, can we just stop celebrating those things to make us look better than other people? It's really fucking obvious that that's what you're doing. And it's really annoying and really frustrating. And I've
never seen you so heated.
Drives me nuts. Never?
Well, at me, sorry. That's something that isn't between you or I.
Yeah. And I just think like, I'm a pretty competitive person. We're pretty competitive people. I'm not saying competition is bad at all, but it's like we don't need to compete with each other on how hard we work. And that's in turn just causing so many of us to fall into these health pits at 30. And It's like, we don't need to be here. Get off social media if someone's making you look like or feel like you need to be doing more. Unfollow people, hide people if they make you feel that way. It's like, we don't need to get in that comparison trap. And I think it's really just like stay in your own lane, look at what you're doing, and whatever it is that you're doing, take a second and reflect, why am I doing this? Like we always say, fitness and nutrition and health, all of those things should help elevate your life. And if it's bringing more stress, I'm going to tell you to just think about it for a second. Why are you doing what you're doing? Say, like, why am I foam rolling all of the time? Why am I trying to do this? Why am I trying to run 3 more miles a day? And really just take a second and ask why, and stop comparing yourself to everybody else, because it's really fucking simple. The end. End rant.
That's it. That's a wrap. Get out of here and go recover. Peace.